In for Shannon Bream. This is a Fox News alert. Three major breaking stories at this late hour, spanning the continent, really, from the boundaries of Pennsylvania's 18th congressional district, where the candidates are gathered at their respective headquarters, nervous at this hour, to the border wall taking shape south of San Diego. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Ellison Barber covering the next exits after Brexit. William Lajeunesse following the president in SoCal, and Molly Line in Elizabeth Township, Pennsylvania, with the latest on the battle between Republican Rick Saccone and Democrat Conor Lamb. But we begin with our chief political anchor, Bret Baier, who's with me. He's going to be here throughout the hour, of course, host of Special Report. We thought this was going to be a close race, but I don't think anyone had that it was going to be within 100 votes.
No, 95 votes right now separate these two candidates. And you have precincts where the Republican, Saccone, should be doing better. Still two precincts out in Washington County that have yet to be counted. You have 95 votes. You have 1,200 absentee ballots in Washington.
In that one county.
In that one county that will not be counted until tomorrow morning, we're told, by officials at this hour. And you have about 1,100 in Allegheny County that will be counted within the next 14 minutes. Okay. They're already in the computer, and they're supposed to be downloaded within the next 14 minutes.
But big picture, and you've been reporting on this, there's somewhere around 6,000 or 7,000 total absentee ballots scanning these counties that we're showing right now. Some we'll see, as you say, in the next 15 minutes or so. But many of these, we expect, will actually be tabulated, counted, and reported out tomorrow. So we are unlikely to know the winner tonight.
Washington and Greene counties are already saying that they can't get the absentee ballots counted tonight, and it will be tomorrow morning. So you're probably going to be in a situation where we're not going to know until tomorrow morning, if we know then. Remember that this is not a statewide race, so it's not an automatic recount, but either campaign can trigger a recount by getting 3 voters in each precinct to sign a form and say, we want a recount.
And if they're willing to pay for it, then the state law basically says there'll be a recount.
Right.
And you would expect it with this close, it's likely.
Yes, but here's the other thing, is that this district, as we've been talking about all night, has been redrawn. And if it holds up in the courts, this district will no longer be around by November.
So we're spending millions, they're spending millions and millions of dollars on both sides, and yet this seat is blowing up. We're going to go live in a moment to the district, but I just want to get big picture from you first, Bret, which is, you know, look, this is a fight for not just for a seat, but a fight for a narrative. And you have Democrats talking about a blue wave, and they have something to be said for the fact that Donald Trump carried this district by 20 points in 2016. Plus, he added the tax cut and the tariffs, so people have fatter paychecks. And the tariffs were aimed at this district in particular. So even if the Republicans pull it out, it's been a struggle.
It may not be a giant blue wave, but it's definitely more than a ripple, because you have a district where Trump won by 20 points and white working-class voters voted for the Democrat. Now, this is not the Democrat that you've seen across the country as far as being more progressive, as the party has leaned towards Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. This is a Democrat who campaigned on gun rights, who is pro-tax law, who is basically with the unions on the tariffs, and is somebody who ran away from Nancy Pelosi and didn't want any Hollywood stars in this campaign, unlike that Georgia race we saw earlier.
All right, Bret, stand by. Our chief political anchor is here. He's got the pencil out. He's got the iPhone. He's literally tabulating votes as we speak. But I want to go to Saccone headquarters. That's a Republican candidate in Elizabeth Township, Pennsylvania. We'll give Bret a chance to dig into the numbers while our own Molly Line is standing by. What are you seeing on the ground there, Molly? Is there excitement at the Saccone headquarters? He's been behind the whole night, and yet now, at this late hour, he's closer than he's ever been.
I think you may be able to hear some of the cheers behind me, Ed. Great to be with you tonight. They remain hopeful here on the ground here at the Saccone headquarters, here at the Saccone camp. We've been hearing chants of Rick throughout the evening as the numbers get closer and closer. Within the last hour, one of the officials jumped up on stage and said things were within a couple hundred votes. And we just heard Bret Baier their report that it was now down to 95. You could hear a cheer go as those numbers get closer. I want to contribute a little bit to what Bret was talking about, what I'm hearing from officials and sources here on the ground as far as things not being over this evening, potentially not being over even as we enter tomorrow morning and into the next potentially couple of days. I'm hearing here on the ground that things may very well turn on absentee ballots, that there could potentially be thousands of absentee ballots still out there, and that some of the most interesting action, where some of the most interesting counting and numbers could come in the days to come, is Washington County. Of course, that's been very close as we've seen these returns coming in, and that may very well be a place where we could see election lawyers gathering tomorrow morning to get a closer look at these absentee ballots. You talked about a narrative, Ed, and what we've seen in the district just within the last week has been an incredible all-hands-on-deck approach on the part of Republicans, on the part of the GOP, and the president and his family. The president, of course, making 2 stops here in the district over the course of this campaign. He came on Saturday holding a big rally. Also here in the district over the course of the last months and weeks, the Vice President Mike Pence, the first daughter, Donald Trump Jr. made a stop here yesterday, and also Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway. It really speaks to the commitment, the investment that is made in this candidate, State Rep. Rick Saccone, the Republican, in this race. On the Democratic side, Joe Biden, the former vice president, made a stop here, and you've been talking about organized labor and the potential influence of organized labor. And if Lamb pulls off a victory, or even comes in very, very close to pulling off a victory, there is some sentiment that this could be seen in Democratic circles as a major win regardless. The senator from Pennsylvania, Bob Casey, saying that essentially this was a close race to watch, a bellwether, in fact, concerning a potential win, that it could be a very telling indicator that people want change. So I think as the days go forward, regardless of whether or not we get a winner tonight or tomorrow morning or the day after, we may hear a narrative developing from Democrats that this could be seen as a success from their circles. Ed?
Well, Molly, about 2 hours or so ago, we were getting your reports suggesting on the ground that some of the Saccone folks were going home. Some might have been disappointed because he was behind. Others just didn't want to stop all night. As you can see behind you, there's excitement there for electricity for the first time. They believe maybe he does have a shot. So talk about that. But also, are you getting any information on the ground about a time frame? Is this all just kind of up in the air, or is there a sense that by noon tomorrow they'll have the ballots counted? Is it by 3 p.m.? Any sense of where we're headed?
On both those points, I have not seen people trickling out of this room throughout the night. I think the crowd is pretty much stuck around. We saw a few children leave a few minutes ago, but other than that, the adults seem to be sticking around. Still seem to be a lot of excitement, a lot of smiles on faces. So I don't think they've given up hope here in the Saccone camp. As far as when this could potentially be over, what I'm really getting is some insight into this really unlikely to be over tonight, probably not tomorrow, and potentially could take days. So they really seem like they're looking at these absentee ballots, and it may take a little while to get the job done. Ed?
All right, Molly, we'll get back to you in a moment. We're going to get to Brett in a moment as well, but I want to now deal in Chris Stirewalt, FoxNews.com political editor, man about town.
Or something.
Or some sort of
something.
Yeah, I might have gotten the title wrong, but we're just kind of going with it right now because this is kind of a wild story, to say the least. Doctor, what say you?
This is what I live for. This is this is the best. You are down to the very end. We just got a bunch of vote dumped in, Allegheny County vote. Connor Lamb put his margin back up to about 850 votes, the same bandwidth where we've seen him the whole time. But as you guys were talking about before, Washington County, which is partly suburban Pittsburgh on the northern side and on the eastern side, but also is coal country. There are plenty of votes for both of these candidates in Washington County. When the absentees get counted tomorrow, this thing could really, 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 really go either way. This is pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Wow. Chris, what was your sense as well in some of the models we talked about last night? The Monmouth University poll was suggesting that everybody was saying, oh, you know, Saccone, the Republican, can't possibly win. But that had different models. 3 different models of who might show up. What's your sense of who actually showed up tonight?
Well, my first sense is that the pollsters at Monmouth should start picking polls instead of saying it could be one of 11 different things. And if somebody wears a baseball cap and whatever else, it's a bunch of silly business and they ought to pick. We do, so should they. The other thing is this race is whatever else happens. So I care about this stuff as a political nerd. I care about these individual things and these counties and this stuff. But in the larger motif, it's all fitting into a piece. Brett mentioned it earlier, and it's very true. The average advantage for Democrats in races compared to the 2016 performance is 16 points. That's how much Democrats are doing better. They have done better in these districts and these races than Hillary Clinton did and Democrats did in 2016. 16 points. This is 20 points. This is a 20-point improvement. So that is the larger the meta takeaway here is. It's more than a ripple. It might be a wave. That's a pretty big number.
So how nervous, Brett? Let me bring Brett in as well, and then we'll go back to Chris in a moment. Brett, how nervous should Republicans be tonight that even if they pull this out, Chris is sort of talking about, Democrats have a lot of energy.
They do, and in this particular district, as far as being a bellwether, I don't know if that's the case. Both parties spending a lot of money on this one race. You have a lot of factors that could change between now and November, but clearly enthusiasm is on the Democratic side, and you can't discount that. This candidate, though, is different. And Conor Lamb ran a really great race. He out-fundraised Saccone 5-1.
Right.
He was just better on the stump. He's
Former
a
Marine, says he's not going to vote for Speaker Pelosi.
I mean, he ran away from Nancy Pelosi. This is kind of a different animal.
Another factor is a Libertarian candidate who pretty much none of us were talking about, and he's on Twitter tonight saying that maybe he's going to decide this race.
Yeah, just a few minutes ago, Drew Gray Miller tweeted, "We're only a few hours away from me being the most hated man in America, hashtag PA18. He has 1,337 votes, and obviously the spread here is now about 800 between the two. Now, I tweeted that earlier saying, just pointing it out, noting it, and people were like, well, of course it's going to go one way or the other. Libertarian votes come one way or the other. It doesn't matter. It's more than the difference of the two.
So if he's not in the race, those 1,300 votes go to the two who are within 1,300 votes of one another. So, Chris, the Libertarian candidate, did you see him coming?
Yeah, we were tracking him a bogey all the way in. And the thing to remember about third-party votes is they don't belong to either side. If you are willing to go out in foul weather in Western Pennsylvania, if you're willing to go out and go vote for a Libertarian candidate, you probably meant to. You probably meant to go do that. You're probably not an available vote to either party.
Well, Al Gore for many years was pretty angry at Ralph Nader going back to the 2000 campaign. It wasn't just Bush v. Gore, but Ralph Nader in states like Florida helped tilt the balance and pulled votes from Al Gore. This Libertarian candidate, Brett, out of nowhere, may throw a race that is seen as a bellwether, whether it is or not.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about the narrative, the spin after this. Republicans, they have reason to be jittery because of the turnout here for the Democrat. But if they win, it's less so. It feels better. If they lose, it's going to be heinous. It's just not going to feel good. And Democrats are going to run, for the races and say this is indication of what November is going to show. So far, all the Allegheny absentees coming in, that means there's roughly about 3,200 absentees left. And as we mentioned, Washington and Greene counties are places where Saccone should do better, but they're smaller precincts. So whether the votes equal
some votes,
the number is really the question.
Brett, and in terms of this whole idea of a Democratic wave, on the other hand, Democrats came close but no cigar in 4 special elections for House seats, Georgia, Kansas, etc., over the last year or so. That may happen again. Do Republicans have any hope coming out of this saying, you know what, it was tough, we're facing all these political headwinds, win or lose here? Saccone, who people inside the White House have told me in the last 48 hours, horrible candidate, not raising money, as you said. Is there some measure of victory, win or lose here for the White House, that the president went in there and helped tighten this race big time? He was down 6-8 points.
Yeah, I think, again, if he wins, it makes it a much easier narrative to tell. But I think that but in a district where the president won by 20, they just can't look at these numbers and say, yippee.
Right.
But they can look at a candidate that is not the traditional Democratic candidate that you're seeing across the country, and saying that the equation is going to point out that Nancy Pelosi was not a factor in this race for this candidate. And I would imagine that the House Minority Leader will be in a lot of ads for Republican candidates come November.
We've got a lot of assets here at Fox News, starting with Bret Baier, but we've also got Chad Pergram, our senior Capitol Hill producer. He's all over these races all around the country as well. Chad, welcome tonight. And I wonder, I just mentioned about, there have been a lot of close races here, and it could be spun either way, with Democrats saying, look, as Bret said, this is a district that the president carried by 20 points. They should be winning here hands down. But there have been other cases here where the Democrats came close but did not win.
Right. Think about the races in Kansas that they had with Ron Estes to succeed, ironically enough, Mike Pompeo, the now Secretary of State nominee. There was a close race in Montana, Greg Gianforte, who didn't even get 50% in that race after he body slammed a reporter. There was a big surprise in South Carolina for Mick Mulvaney's seat. A lot of people in June of last year were focused on the Georgia special election between the Democrat Jon Ossoff and now the Republican Congresswoman Karen Handel. But Archie Parnell, a Democrat, came very close to winning that race, a Democrat. So, you know, basically, if you look at these races, Democrats are 0 for 4, and it's driving them nuts, the fact that they can't win these. There's been a couple of other special elections here. They won one in Los Angeles where a Democrat was clearly going to win to succeed Javier Becerra. But it's driving them up a wall because they keep getting so close and they can't do it. Now, I should point out something here, Ed. When it comes to special elections or it comes to close elections, the touchstone in recent years was 1994. Sam Gadenson was a Democratic congressman from Connecticut, and he won by 4 votes. It was later expanded to 21 votes. So we've had these close races before, and it looks like this is going to be one of those very close contests again.
Okay. We have a Fox News alert right now, in fact, Chad, and we'll get back to you. But the Associated Press is taking a rare move tonight and reporting just in the last moment that they will not call this race tonight. All media organizations were looking to them. Typically, they start this. You saw that on election night 2016 when the Associated Press called Pennsylvania, in fact, for Donald Trump. That was the end for Hillary Clinton. Tonight, the Associated Press just telling us they will not call a winner in this race tonight. Let's go right to Chris Stirewalt. What does that tell you? Obviously, it tells you it's too close to call. But where are we tonight, Chris?
Well, these are my old stomping grounds, and I can tell you that as important as this is to the country, as important as this is to Democrats and Republicans and everybody else, if you're the county clerk in Washington County, Pennsylvania, and it gets to be nigh on about 10:30, you say, you jackals can wait till tomorrow to tear each other apart. You don't need me. We'll see you in the morning. So that's decent and reasonable on their part, and I understand it. I would like to make reference, though, to something Brett said before about the Democrats, how they've been running nationally in the direction, the resist, the progressivism, and all that stuff. We now have we have 2 winners and 1 potential winner. We have a guy with a lead at the end. And we saw in Alabama in the Roy Moore race, right? So we saw the Democrat there. We saw Ralph Northam, the new governor of Virginia. We now see Conor Lamb. There's a trend here, right? You're starting to see a trend where you have these moderate Democrats, where you have these Democrats that choose. They don't engage. When Doug Jones was running down in Alabama, he didn't resist against the president. When Ralph Northam was running in Virginia, he said, I'm not getting into all that. I want to run the Commonwealth of Virginia, not this. You have Conor Lamb says, I care about these counties. And what this tells me is there's enough rage, there's enough anger inside the Democratic base. They don't have to suck up to those voters right now. They're free to reach out to the center. They're free to reach out to disaffected suburban Republicans and try to woo them. And that gives Democrats a great opportunity.
Yeah, and in fact, it's about the math, right, Brett? So there are going to be traditional Democratic seats where Nancy Pelosi is going to want the Democratic nominee to fall into line if they're going to win and try to take back the House. But then there are going to be races like this where we're going to say, you got to go your own way. This is a district that Donald Trump carried by 20 points. I know you're not going to support me.
Well, you know, Chad can tell you chapter and verse of all these races in the past that how really the landscape for Democrats changed. The blue dog Democrats, the moderate Democrats started to be erased in the big equation here. And this guy, Conor Lamb, is more like them. And if, as a party, they decide that that is the equation that they need to have, and they actually recruit candidates like him, then they have a really good chance of picking up the needed seats to take over the House. But if the inclination is to go more left, as the National Party seems to want to do, you're going to have a hard time in a district like Pennsylvania 18. Absolutely.
Guy Benson, townhall.com, joins us now as well. Guy, as you look at this, what were your expectations going in and now? Guy's still getting ready, so we're going to give him a moment. Okay, Guy, what is your sense about, the expectation was, look, Donald Trump carried this by 20 points. The Republicans should win, but they had a weak candidate in the estimation of even some Republican Party officials. This might be a Democratic win, and all night the Democrat was leading. And here we are as we're getting closer and closer to midnight Eastern time, and it is simply too close to call.
Yeah, it's a very close race. We'll know tomorrow morning. It looks like Conor Lamb, the Democrat, might have just enough to squeak this one out. But really, the ultimate victor in this contest doesn't really matter that much. As Brett alluded to earlier, this whole district is going to be wiped off the map with the new map in just a few months. The key here, the biggest takeaway by far, is that once again Democrats are vastly overperforming their metrics from 2016. And in this case, this is the heart of coal country, Rust Belt, Trump Nation. And the fact that Donald Trump went down there as president, had the big rally for his guy in a very safe-looking red district, carried easily by John McCain, easily by Mitt Romney, in dominant fashion by Donald Trump by almost 20 points, and the Democrat is tied or slightly ahead. That, I think, tells the story about why very many Republicans in this city tonight are awfully nervous about November.
Nervous guy, but if you look back to Saturday night, when Rick Saccone was down roughly 6 points, depending on which poll you believe, Donald Trump went in there, did one of those rousing rallies, took his shots at the media, had thousands of people. I interviewed Rick Saccone the next morning. He said there were hundreds at least, if not thousands, kept outside because it was an overflow. Did Donald Trump, though, have some coattails here even to get Rick Saccone to this point?
Very well could be the case. We don't have exit polls in this race, so we don't know how late deciders broke. But the fact that the Republican president would have to come to the district to whip up excitement just to get his guy back into a tie with a Democrat in a Trump plus 20 district, that is not good news for the GOP.
Not good news for the GOP. And Brett, if I bring you back in, Politico had an interesting story today where they talked about the tax law and basically made the case that in this particular district, and it's going to be analyzed and overanalyzed, the tax cut was not front and center. And the people are going to second guess what worked, what didn't work. But is that something that Republicans can use coast to coast a lot more than they did in this district to say your paycheck is a bit bigger right now because of Donald Trump, and not a single Democrat in the House or Senate voted for it? Yeah.
One would think that there are Republicans who are going to hit on that again and again and again, especially if the economy continues to improve, because, you know, when people look at their bank accounts, they don't look at crumbs in the bank accounts, they look at dollars. And how you feel at the kitchen table come November will affect how a lot of these districts go. So I expect, like I said, Nancy Pelosi and those statements that she made about the tax law to be front and center in a lot of these races. That said, if Democrats can demonstrate what they're demonstrating here and in other races where they weren't supposed to perform, I think it's going to be tough sledding for Republicans come November.
Chad Pergram, Brett makes a great point about Nancy Pelosi. She made the crumbs comment. She said people were going to die if the tax cut passed. It was going to be Armageddon. In the last week or so, as you know better than anyone, you must have been at that news conference, you started to walk that back a little bit and say, well, if people are getting a bigger paycheck, if they're getting a bonus, we of course want that. Is there any angst in the Democratic Party about nobody voting in either the House or the Senate, no Democrats voting for the tax cut, and some of the Pelosi comments that have been blown up?
Well, I think some of it can swing on what the outcome of this race is. There's going to be two very important rooms on Capitol Hill tomorrow morning. One is HC5 in the basement of the Capitol. That's where the Republicans will meet, and also the Gabe Zimmerman room where the Democrats will meet. And depending on how they interpret this race tomorrow, Republicans might say, wait a minute, we voted for the tax bill, and the president came and campaigned, and this is a real problem for us. If it took this just to get into a tie, what's going to happen here? Whereas Democrats might say, we're turning on Nancy Pelosi again. They've had those recriminations on the Democratic side of the aisle after these other special elections in Kansas and Georgia and so on over the past year where they haven't been able to close the deal. They've come close, but no cigar. And as you know, Ed, only winning counts in politics. And this is where, after those special election losses, even though they had an energized base and they came so close, they turned up the heat on Nancy Pelosi. People like Kathleen Rice from Long Island and Seth Moulton from Massachusetts saying this is why we need different leadership. You heard those same voices after they didn't really pick up many seats in the 2016 election.
Chad, we've got an interesting tweet that just came in that Brett's looking at. Brett, what are you seeing?
Well, this is from the Cook Political Report, Dave Wasserman, who is well-respected U.S. House editor for Political Report 538 blog. We've seen a lot of these guys who watch these races very closely, and he says projection, barring a major tabulation error, Conor Lamb, the Democrat, has defeated Rick Saccone in Pennsylvania 18. Watches it really closely, just looking at all the numbers left with the absentee ballots. Really the way that Saccone wins, according to Wasserman and a couple other guys who watch these numbers closely, is a recount, and somehow the numbers change in the computation.
Because the way the projections have been going, the trend lines in specific counties where absentee ballots are would suggest, according to this.
Right, because you had that dump from Allegheny that gave Lamb a bigger lead there, the 700 plus. You have smaller precincts in Washington and Greene. They're just doing the strict numbers based on percentages and saying unless something major happens on computation.
It's going to be hard for the Republican Saccone to catch up, but still unofficial, obviously. That's just an estimate. And Molly Line knows that as well, because even the Associated Press, which typically calls these races, House, Senate, presidential, is saying tonight they will not call a winner. We've got Molly Line at Saccone headquarters there in Pennsylvania. Molly Line, how are they reacting to that? Saccone has not been leading at all. He's been down the entire night. This is as close as he's gotten. Do they see any hope in the fact that a winner has not been called?
Well, I can't say that the folks here in this room are aware that the AP is not going to call a winner this evening, and they are still here. You can see there's still a pretty full room here. We are waiting to find out if State Rep Rick Saccone, the Republican in this race, is going to speak tonight or not. That is unclear at this point in time. We understand that the campaign and Mr. Saccone himself are still optimistic tonight, and they're still waiting to get some numbers in. They're hoping to get further clarity still out of Washington County. That seems to be where all eyes are looking. And I am being told by one person that works with the campaign at this point in time that they are looking into the potential possibilities of legal action in the days to come. But really, they still remain focused on these absentee ballots, also the potential for some outstanding provisional and military ballots as well. We've also tried to get some clarity as to whether or not they feel like, win or lose, because the Democrats have done well in this race and made this such a tight race, that in a sense the Democrats win. And what I'm being told by this official is that when you win, you win. When you lose, you lose. So they feel like if Mr. Saccone wins this race and becomes the congressman from this district, that this was his win and that he'll be representing the people of the 18th. So that's where things stand now. We expect to see a lot of action, they say, at all of the counties tomorrow. In other words, there won't be a particular focus just in Washington County, although they seem pretty interested in that county this evening. But Allegheny, Washington, Greene, and Westmoreland may all see lawyers on hand looking into the full capacity, all the votes, all the absentee ballots. And in the days to come, we'll see. There may be a lot of counting going on, we'll say. Ed?
You're absolutely right, Molly. Legal challenges, perhaps, no matter what is said tonight or tomorrow. One quick update right now. I want to bring in Bret Baier again. There are some indications that Washington County may be counting. Yeah,
Washington County officials are now saying that they were thinking they were going to count tomorrow, but now they look like they're going to count tonight. But it's essentially brew the coffee here because it's going to take several hours.
Bret, are they going to do it by midnight? I need to know.
I don't know. I think you're staying a longer. That's what I heard in my ear.
I was wondering about 11:59 or midnight.
I'm not sure.
Let's go to Chris Stirewalt. Chris, you've been following these for a long, long time. This is pretty amazing.
Ed, get up. You're going back to the courthouse. Turn the machines back on. We got to do it. Because, you know, millions of people in the country are watching and waiting. And and by the way, if you're the county commissioner in Washington County, you don't want people thinking your county's a slouch, that you guys don't get the job done. So you get Mrs. Krabappel back up and get her down there and turn that machine on.
They might have heard you a few moments ago. You said that county clerk is really powerful and said, wait till tomorrow. Maybe now they heard Stirewalt.
They're saying 3 hours now. 3 hours to count the ballots. 1,195 of them.
I know you have a show tomorrow, but are you going to stick around? We kind of need you right now.
He's trying to sweat you, Bret. He's sweating you on air.
We just want to know.
Look at the time.
But Stirewalt, what's your sense? Bret also brought up a good point about the Cook Political Report. They've been covering this for a long time.
Dave Wasserman, yeah.
Very nonpartisan. And they're saying the trend lines, at least, suggest that the Democrat is going to win. That is far from any kind of official estimate. But what's your sense of the trend line?
Well, Dave Wasserman's better on the county. He is in a very rarefied air when we're talking about district by district level in terms of mapping these things out. He knows these districts better than almost anybody I know. But But what we do know is that given the cash vote, what we don't know is, will the uncounted absentee ballots reflect the overall electoral composition of the county? Will they be more Democratic or more Republican? Now, one would tend to think that Democratic intensity being what it is, that the votes, the people, remember, it takes voter intensity to be an absentee voter. If you're willing, it's one thing to stop by on your way home and go vote. But if you mail it in and you request an absentee ballot and you do mail it in, that means that that is a good gauge of voter intensity. So the good news for Saccone, the votes that are out are in Washington County, which is a county that he's going to win and which is a county where he has plenty of his voters. The bad news for Saccone is, given the Democratic intensity levels and what we'd expect to see among absentee voters, he can't count on even keeping the margin that he has among the in-person voters today.
All right, Chris Stirewalt, great analysis as always. You stand by. We're going to try to get Brett to stand by as well. We might be here for a long time. We want you to fire up the pot of coffee. Stick with us. Fox News at Night is not closing the lights. We're sticking around. Quick break. We'll be right back with the latest results. Cohn, the Republican candidate, he'd been counted out by many in the media, many of the pundits, is in a neck-and-neck race tonight. He's talking to his supporters. Let's go there live.
That's it. We're not giving up. But I wanted to come down and thank you all. And I know you have, you got to go to work tomorrow, and everybody's got things to do. And I didn't want to keep you here later than you really need to be, because we're going to be working late into the night and into tomorrow. But I wanted to thank you all, because I know how hard you've worked. And I was out at some of the polls today. I know how cold it was, and I know you spent all those hours out there for us, for our family, and for all of you, and for the agenda that we're working on. And you never gave up. You never gave up on us. You never gave up on me. And I thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are amazing. I'm not kidding you. You're amazing. You're always so upbeat. You're salt of the earth. You're the best people in the world. I couldn't ask for a better blessing than to have supporters like you, and I'm pleased that you're still here. And again, I don't want you to try to hang on too much. I know many of you got to go, but I definitely wanted to come down and say to you that I thank you ever so much, and we're going to keep fighting, and don't give up, and we'll keep it up. We're going to win it. God bless you all.
All right, you heard it there from Rick Saccone. He's been called frumpy, I guess, by some even in the Republican Party, but you can see he's pretty fired up tonight. Not so frumpy, Bret Baier. All of a sudden, somebody who's showing life and saying, I'm not going away easy. He's still in this race.
He is. Listen, I mean, it's not over until it's over, and there's no call as of yet. As we said, some of these counties are choosing tonight, even though they said they were going to count them tomorrow. They're going to count these absentee ballots. There are enough votes out there. The trend line leans towards Lamb pulling this out, but the key overall point here is that Lamb ran as a Republican. I mean, he was pro-gun, anti-Pelosi, pro-life, pro-tax law, pro-tariff.
Supported the Trump tariffs, that's right.
Trump tariffs. Name the Democrat who is checking all those boxes.
Right.
I mean, turn it around, and Donald Trump could have campaigned for Conor Lamb, I mean, if he had a different letter in front of his name. And so this is a unique race, and one in which you wonder whether the national parties will look at and say, this is a shift in these candidates and the way they're choosing them.
That gives us a perfect opportunity to go to Richard Fowler. First time we've heard from him tonight, Democratic strategist. Richard, what do you say about that? Big night for Democrats, say you, but on the other hand, as Brett said, maybe the Democrat wins in a squeaker, maybe I underline, after rejecting much of your party's platform.
I wouldn't say it's much of the party's platform. I think there's a couple things here. Number one, I think he is definitely pro-labor, which I think is the big story tonight, is that labor unions came out for Mr. Lamb in record number. After voting for Trump in 2016, these labor families said, listen, we have bigger decisions. I mean, Lamb backed this ideal of finding a way to solidify the pension fund, something that's being a big fight for working people all across this country. He ran on that. He also ran on this ideal that, the repealing the Affordable Care Act isn't the way to go. go. We need to fix it and make it work. And I got to tell you, I think that's the one thing that Democrats need to look to as we get closer to this upcoming midterms elections is how we talk about health care. Not the Affordable Care Act, but employer-sponsored health care where the cost is going through the roof. How can we work in Washington to fix that? That's going to be a major issue that we saw play out here in what is going to be a nail-biter. We're going to be here pretty long.
We're keeping you around. Don't go anywhere, Richard.
I'm not.
Guy Benson is here as well from townhall.com. What say you from the right, Guy? Particularly healthcare is added to the mix there by Richard, but the economy as well is something the president is banking on, helping him, helping the Republican Party in the midterms. But as we've been discussing, the tax cut is starting to take effect. People are feeling better paychecks in this district and around the country, and yet the Republican struggled through this race.
Yeah, I think the frightening thing if you're a Republican is the economy is in terrific shape. And most Trump policies are working well. And even in this Trump plus 20 district, a Democrat appears poised to pull off an upset and a virtual tie at worst, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say this about the needle being threaded by Conor Lamb in this campaign. He was pro-Obamacare, or more anti-repeal, but also against single-payer health care and universal health care.
Guy, pardon me 1 second. I just want to go to Chris Stirewalt, our politics editor. I understand he has some breaking news from the House Democratic campaign arm. What are you hearing, Chris?
Yeah, they don't need no stinking AP. The DCCC says that they are congratulating Conor Lamb on his victory in Pennsylvania's 18th district, going on to say they're calling it a fait accompli. All the House Republican attacks, and here's your takeaway. These results say the Democrats should terrify Republicans, despite their home field advantage and the millions of dollars outside groups poured into this race. Republicans found their attacks against Conor, including their unpopular tax scam, were not believable. So Dems are not waiting until morning. They're not waiting till the coffee brews.
Yeah. Bret Baier, let's bring you in, chief political anchor. What's your sense? Obviously, either party can stand up here now, even though they're absentee ballots, and say, we won, everybody go home. It's not over yet. But what's your sense about where we are?
Well, I think each party will have their spin. You know, Democrats will say this is the biggest thing ever, you know, once, if it turns out that Conor Lamb wins. And Republicans will say, hey, weak candidate, what's the big deal? District's going to be redone. Saccone could run in the district next door and still be a congressman come January. And that is true, as crazy as it is. By March 20th, these guys have to decide whether they're going to run in a different district. And whether they're going to fight a primary and then run in November.
Against one another again.
Or against somebody else.
Somebody else, if one, yeah. Unbelievable. Richard Fowler, we just spoke to you briefly, but now that the House Democratic campaign arm is saying, we win, what say you?
It's a smart move by the House Democratic arm to sort of claim victory here. But here's the thing, and I think Guy made a good point, what he just said, is the idea that this was a district that Donald Trump won by 20 points. The Republicans and outside groups spent over $10 million to make this a tied race. They had the president in there, they had Don Jr. in there, they had Kellyanne Conway in there to make this a tied race, which, while Brett is right that this is not a real race because it's sort of over before it even starts, right? There is something to be said for other vulnerable Republicans who are running to say, man, we've really got to figure out what we're going to run on, and we can no longer run on Pelosi if Democrats run on localized issues in these particular congressional districts as we get into the midterm elections.
Guy Benson, you were making those good points when I rudely interrupted you to get to that breaking news. I want to come back to you, Guy. What is your sense after hearing that from the DCCC?
Well, you said there's competing spin from the two parties, and on this one, the Democrats have the better spin because the facts are on their side. The Republicans are going to do their best to put a happy face on this, regardless of the outcome. Even a dramatic comeback victory tomorrow with the absentees for Saccone, it's still that 19, 20-point swing away from the GOP to Democrats. I would say this. I talked to a number of Republicans very plugged in on the House side over the last few weeks, and they said nationally the tax bill and the tax law is becoming much more popular, especially in a number of crucial swing districts. But Pennsylvania 18 was not one of them. So it was not a real asset for Saccone and the Republicans to be running on the tax law where it might be in some other races come November. So, look, that's going to be one of the things Republicans are going to regroup here and say, all right, Conor Lamb ran away from Nancy Pelosi explicitly. Will the Pelosi playbook work against blue dog Democrats who are going out of their way to say, I don't support Pelosi, and who are willing to make enough noises to attract some Republican voters over to their side, and Republicans have to sit back and think about intensity, enthusiasm, and some of the real shortcomings that they've seen so far, is there anything that can be done to light a fire under the Republican base that can match what we're seeing on the Democratic side?
I want to just jump in here, I think, because I think Guy is right on that particular point. And the only point that I would add to that is I think for Republicans, they've got to figure out what their message is. And clearly, if it's a tax cut message, that's not going to work in every district. And I think we would be mistaken if we didn't remember that for the past two and a half, 3 weeks, we've seen the White House in utter chaos. And a lot of voters don't like to see a White House in chaos. And so even though the economy is doing well, they said, I'm voting for something that's not chaotic. And so that's that's the point you made tonight, too.
And can I just jump in?
Go ahead,
a quick response to that. Another reason why I think the Republican spin here is weak. The Democrats need 24 seats to regain the House, net 24 seats. There are 23 seats currently being held by Republicans in the House in districts won by Hillary Clinton. That's the low-hanging fruit. This was not the low-hanging fruit. This was relatively red, ruby red country in Pennsylvania, and the Dems have picked it off. That right there, I think, is telling and worrisome to people like me who are conservatives who would have liked to have seen Saccone win comfortably, which in other years he would have. But it's 2018. The landscape is different.
So, Chris Stirewalt, as you hear that thoughtful conversation back and forth between the left and the right about what is the Republican message moving forward, the Democratic message, we should point out, we haven't gotten into this part of the onion just yet, is resist, resist, resist. You didn't hear that, as Brett pointed out, in this district because it's more conservative, ruby red, as you heard. And so there was, we don't like Pelosi and we do like the tariffs. But resist, resist, and Russia, Russia is what we're going to hear in a whole lot of other districts around the country. What's the Republican message, do you think, moving forward? What message should they take from this?
Well, first, on the matter of the Democrats, don't forget, resist was good enough for Republicans to win back the House in 2010. Resist is good enough. Americans like divided government. They generally don't like to give one party too much leeway as they go forward, and that is a natural proclivity. That's why we have presidents generally lose large numbers of seats, dozens of seats in the House from their party in their first midterm. So there's that part. There's a historical precedent. But as for the Republican message, how do you run on a platform that says American carnage, there's trouble? You listen to the president's speech on Saturday. He was not describing a happy, healthy, good country. He was not talking, he talked, yes, about the economic growth. He talked about the tax cuts, but he was painting a pretty dire picture about the condition of America. Yeah. In trying to say, you can't vote for a Democrat or we'll go back. And I understand that part. Meantime, you have Paul Ryan and House Republicans basically saying, hey, let's sell this tax cut. Hey, let's talk about the good economy. Yeah. Hey, let's focus on the positives.
Brett, real quick, I don't want to leave it unchallenged from Richard, the idea of White House chaos. We can go back and forth on this all night. The president says there's no chaos, there's energy, and then he fires the Secretary of State. So there's at least some chaos. But I would imagine a lot of voters who frankly don't care about the Washington parlor game of who's going to be the VA secretary next week. What's your sense of all that?
No. But this administration has seen more people leave than most any other administration at this point, 14 months in. Remember, the Secretary of State was fired today. You have a new CIA director nominee who is the first woman to hold any agency like that. You have what's happening with North Korea and the meetings that are said to be going forward. These are major events, right, let alone what's happening in Syria, let alone the fact that you have to renew or decide to get out of the Iran deal. Right. These are every day. This is like, dog years in 1 week of covering what is drinking from a fire hose in this administration. So think of all the things that can change, positively or negatively, between now and November in the midterms.
And we're not even halfway through the first Trump term.
Yeah.
Let's go to Molly Line. She's been digging around all night there at Saccone headquarters. She's there with a Saccone supporter. Molly, you've heard the House Democrats at least claim, we underline claim, victory tonight. What are they saying on the ground there?
Well, they still have hope here on the ground here. I'm joined by David Perdorgle. He's one of the many supporters that stuck around here to the end of the evening until Rick came out and spoke, until Mr. Saccone came out and spoke, and essentially thanked all of his supporters for staying so long and for all the hard work they've done. I just want to get your thoughts tonight going forward. Do you want to see the fight continue?
Yes, through the night. I do want to see, I want it to be fair. I want the ending to be, I want us to all know that everything was done right without any cheating, and everything is counted, every single vote, every single absentee ballot is done. And let's get to the bottom of this.
You know, some of the Democrats are claiming that this is in essence a victory, but also a victory just in the matter that they made this so close. What do you say to that?
I don't agree. I mean, I hear what they're saying because I think it's, you know, they're thinking it's against Trump's agenda, and Rick is such a supporter of Mr. Trump. But also, I think you have to look at it, you know, Rick's his own person. And that's all I have to say on that. I can't think of anything more right now. I'm sorry, Molly. I mean, it's just I know what they feel, but I don't know if that's not the feeling we have. You know, we feel that we're going to continue on with victories in the future. Maybe if this one turns the wrong way, that's not going to stop us. We'll keep on gaining ground.
Are you shocked at how close this has turned out to be?
Yes, I am. You know, this has been an area we've always had, the Republicans always held with Murphy, but I am surprised. But I know there was a lot of attention on here, and the Democrats are feeling somewhat energized. I think, you know, they feel that, you know, they want to fight Trump, so they were going to go against Rick. Even some of them might have liked Rick. They were just going to do what their party felt that they wanted them to do.
What about as far as the Democratic contender, Conor Lamb, being more moderate than we've seen other Democrats across the country and other districts running?
I don't think he's as moderate as they're proclaiming. I had a chance to meet him one-on-one. I'm in the coal industry, and I asked him, will he go against the Democratic Party here in Pennsylvania, particularly the governor, and go against his party and vote for coal? And he wouldn't answer that. He would not give us a straight answer. He says, I'm going to vote for energy. So that told me that he's going to follow the party role to keep coal down and keep the war on coal going. So I don't think he's as moderate as they want you to believe.
Are you going to be watching this very closely? Are you going to get any sleep tonight, or are you just going to get up right away in the morning?
I'm going to get up right away in the morning. I have to be up at 6 o'clock anyway, so you know, I have about an hour drive to get home right now. I'll get a little bit of sleep, and then first thing in the morning, I'm putting Fox on to see what happens.
David, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Your sentiments are wonderful. Thanks for sticking around for a quick interview with us tonight.
No problem, Molly. I hope you enjoy Pittsburgh.
Yes, thank you so much. The pepperoni rolls and the pierogies were great. Guys, back to you. This is just one of the sentiments that we're getting here tonight. A lot of similar comments from some of the other folks that are trailing out of the room here at the end of the evening after hearing Mr. Saccone speak. Back to you.
All right, Molly. Great job all night. We appreciate that. Brett, hopefully that gentleman will after work come back and turn on Special Report as well tomorrow, because you're going to be all over this.
Well, hopefully we'll know by then. We'll
Maybe
see.
we won't.
We'll see. But, you know, the counting is going to go on overnight. And as we said, either way, this is going to come out as either a narrow win for the Democrat or a narrow loss for the Republican. And both parties are going to spin it. But in the big picture, it is a concern at the end of the night for the GOP heading into November. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it any other way. Right. This is a alarm bell. Whether it's a canary in the coal mine, we don't know. But this is a district that Trump won big.
Yeah. Now, I know you've been juggling a lot of information. We appreciate it all hour. But at the top of the hour, you said there was at least one county where we may get results within the hour. Is that, have you gotten any sense?
Allegheny dumped, and we got that at the top of the hour. Washington said within 3 hours.
Right.
And Westmoreland said that maybe within the next 45 minutes or so.
We may still be getting results. Chris Stirewalt, what's your sense about where we are right now? We talked about how the House Democrats believe all is said and done here. If they are correct and Conor Lamb wins, what is the message to President Trump tonight?
Well, look, we remember what happened when Ed Gillespie lost in Virginia. The president and Ed Gillespie had sucked up to the president. He had Ed Gillespie, an establishment Republican, had broken Trumpy. He had gone that way. He said, keep the Confederate statues, talked about MS-13, embraced Trumpism. As a typically moderate guy, went the other way. And then in the end, Trump basically washed his hands of Ed Gillespie and said, not Trumpy, but not Trumpy enough. I think that what you're going to see, and I feel really bad for Rick Saccone, because if these numbers hold, if this margin holds, here's a guy who volunteered for service. He said, I'm going to go in and do this, and he's going to get dumped on savagely by his own party. The people who encouraged him into this race, the people that got him into this race, are going to treat him like a bag of old socks, and they're going to beat up on him for having run poorly. And yeah, he didn't raise a lot of money. And yeah, he did not look like Conor Lamb on stage, is the way I'll put it. And he wasn't a good retail politician. But man, he was in the arena, and it's always sad to see when guys like that get beaten up at the end. And I'm afraid that's what'll happen.
Wait a second. Treated like a bag of socks. Let's bring in Guy Benson. You still out there? You're the conservative here. What happened to Ronald Reagan's commandment about not speaking ill of another Republican?
Until the election is over. And if they lose, then out come the knives. And look, my understanding about Saccone, talking to some top-ranking Republicans in this city, is that he's a nice guy who's well-liked, who's just not a very good politician. He was not electric, to put it kindly, on the stump. He was a lousy fundraiser. He got crushed in fundraising by Conor Lamb, which is why all this outside money had to pour into the district to sort of try to help keep this thing relatively close. And you've got to give Lamb credit as well, setting aside the big picture on this, which I think is a rough night for Republicans in terms of tea leaves looking to November. In this particular race, Lamb positioned himself exactly the way that he needed to, the only way he could have to have a chance to win in this district, much more conservative than the center of gravity of his party, coming out against an assault weapons ban, saying he was personally against abortion, but maybe not so much in terms of a voting record and whether or not it should be illegal. He was much more culturally conservative. He wasn't taking pot shots at the president. He was distancing himself explicitly from Nancy Pelosi. The list goes on. That's the type of campaign that had to be run in Pennsylvania 18 by a Democrat. He ran it and made very few unforced errors, and it looks like he's likely to win.
Okay, appreciate it, Guy. I've got Meredith Kelly now. She's a top aide at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Meredith, we appreciate you joining us by phone. What's your sense tonight? We've already reported that House Democrats are claiming victory tonight. With these absentee ballots out there, how can you claim victory?
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me tonight. Listen, we feel confident that there's no path forward for Rick Saccone at this point, based on the votes that are in and the support levels that he's already received in the counties where there are still absentee votes. Even based on our worst-case scenario turnout for Conor in those remaining absentee votes, he can't come back from the nearly 900-vote deficit that he's currently facing.
Well, Meredith, confident of victory is not the same as actually declaring victory, so I wonder, is part of that, we have absentee ballots, as we've been reporting, out there. What are you hearing? You're probably getting better information than we are from your local election officials. What are people on the ground telling House Democrats tonight about when these absentee ballots will be counted?
Well, first of all, I do want to note that I'm not alone, and the DCCC is not alone in predicting that Conor Lamb is victorious tonight. There are a number of nonpartisan prognosticators who believe that it's very unlikely that there's any ultimate result here other than a victory for Conor. Dave Wasserman and many others fall into that category. I think we are going to see we still have a few more precincts out in Westmoreland County that should come in tonight from Election Day. And my understanding is that there'll be some more absentee votes counted throughout the night and into tomorrow. But again, we do not feel that there's any path forward for Rick Saccone at this point. And it's not a surprise. Conor Lamb ran a fantastic campaign connecting with Western Pennsylvanian voters, talking about his pro-job, pro-union, and pro-Medicare and Social Security message. And as a veteran, I think he really connected with people across party lines in Pennsylvania 18. So,
but Meredith, what about the fact that? Yeah, definitely a strong candidate, definitely someone cut from Central Casting, a former Marine, former prosecutor, but he also ran away from Nancy Pelosi. How does your party deal with that moving forward, that some candidates around the country may say, look, run from Nancy Pelosi and you've got a better chance of winning?
Look, Conor Lamb did an incredible job of touting his record of service to both the country as a veteran and his community as a federal prosecutor. And that really took him out of the partisan frame. It had less to do with exactly which issues he talked about and more about his record of service that is so appealing to Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike. I think that was what was a turning point here, especially when you compare that with Rick Saccone, who, despite millions, over $10 million in super PAC money,
Sure, but
just
both
could not
parties spend a
keep up.
lot of money, like every race, so money is spent by both sides. The NRCC, your counterpart, the House Republican campaign arm, is saying this is too close to call, as is the Associated Press. So let me give you one more chance on that point. How confident are you tonight when even the Associated Press, nonpartisan news organization, is saying too close to call?
Well, like I said, we take these things seriously. We would not have declared the fact that we believe Conor is the winner if we didn't have a lot of data backing that up. And, you know, I trust my colleagues here at the DCCC who are very smart in terms of analytics and data, and we really believe that there is no path forward for Rick Saccone.
Okay. Meredith Kelly from the House Democratic Campaign Arm, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Good luck in the days ahead as these ballots are counted.
Thank you, Ed.
Brett, I want to bring you in, and you can react to that. But also interesting that in the last few days, there was this poll by the news organization Axios saying that when you look at Trump country in Senate races, not House races, there are states like Missouri and Montana where the president carried some of these states by double digits, that the Democratic incumbents there were really struggling, that the president was outperforming there still. Do you think that changes a little bit from what we're seeing in Pennsylvania tonight? Or is it just, you know, different states, different districts?
Yeah, I think different states, different districts. I mean, look at, we had a story tonight on Special Report from Peter Doocy in Missouri, and he's with a candidate who is really going to challenge Claire McCaskill, I think, if you look at the numbers and on the issues. In these states where Democrats are up for re-election, in states where Trump won 60, 70, 80% of the counties, you know, there's going to be some tough races for those Democrats. I think what Meredith said, and she didn't really answer your Nancy Pelosi question.
Right. For good reason, probably.
Of course, you know, can the DCCC find Conor Lambs in all the districts that they need to find? Maybe they can. But if they can't, then, you know, you have a progressive leaning party that, you know, is going to have a tough time.
That might be too far left to actually take back the House.
I mean, it's going to be close. I think they have a better chance in the House than they do at the Senate at this moment, but a lot can change before.
Chris Stirewalt, is there a message? There's a message for President Trump. We've made that clear. Is there a message for Nancy Pelosi tonight as well?
There are about 100 seats, that fall within this bandwidth. If this seat represents the outer perimeter or close to the outer perimeter for where Democrats can unseat Republicans, that is close to 100 daggone seats, and the Democrats only need 24. So that can make Nancy Pelosi feel pretty good. But what should make her feel very bad is that the way that Democrats are going to win in a lot of those districts is by distancing themselves from her, and that in the end, whatever happens, whether Democrats win the House or not, Nancy Pelosi is probably not going to be the Speaker of the House ever again.
Yeah, and Republicans don't want her to get off the stage, Chris, because they run these ads, and sometimes it's a last best hope for a struggling Republican, isn't it?
Paul Ryan is going to send a plane for her. If she won't get out on the campaign trail, Paul Ryan's pack will just they'll charter jets to take with fresh cut flowers to take her anywhere she wants in these United States.
Brett, final thought?
Final thought is this is a barn burner. It is. It's going to be.
We have to say that at least once on a night like this.
I think Lamb had the chops tonight, and but we'll see. We'll see tomorrow. I think the Democrats' narrative is going to be, you know, this is a big deal. The Republicans are going to say, hey, listen. We fight another day.
Fight another day. Chad Pergram, thank you. Richard Fowler, Guy Benson, Chris Stirewalt, Brett Baer as well. I'll be back in this chair tomorrow night, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Brett will be with Special Report with all of the results, 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Don't miss it. Thanks for joining us tonight.
This is a Fox News alert. The polls have just closed. We're awaiting results in Pennsylvania's 18th district special election. It's, of course, between Democrat Conor Lamb and Republican Rick Saccone. Fox Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry has the very latest on the story. He joins us now. Ed?
Tucker, great to see you. It's the 18th district in Pennsylvania, includes the suburbs of Pittsburgh. Went for President Bush by 20 points in 2016. Should be easing pickings for his party, in part because his tariffs on aluminum and steel are very popular because it actually means jobs for real people. But Democrats have this young candidate cut from central casting. You mentioned him, Conor Lamb, narrow lead, though he's all but running from national Democratic leaders, promising to vote against Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House and And as a former prosecutor and Marine, he's made a direct appeal to the union workers who snubbed Hillary Clinton last time around. The president labeled the Democrat Lamb the Sham at a raucous rally on Saturday night, slamming Lamb for opposing his tax cuts and immigration crackdown. But folks I've spoken to